We are now streaming live to YouTube and Facebook. Mrs. Hoffman, if you'd like to take roll, I'd appreciate it.
Ms. Sudkamp,
I'm here.
Mr. Cahill,
Present.
Kyle,
Here.
Mr. Skidmore,
Here.
Mr. Hermes,
Here.
Ms. Cahill,
Here.
Mr. Meyer,
Present.
Ms. Skidmore,
Here.
Ms. Pitts,
Here.
Mr. Nicely,
I'm here.
Ms. Reckers, I didn't hear. I still can't hear her, but I can see she's here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Blankenship,
I'm here.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoffman. Appreciate it. Okay, the first item on the agenda tonight is the property tax rate discussion. I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Matt Kramer.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Just wanted to give a quick update on where we are with the taxes before everyone starts discussing it. We started to get the first tax information, which we were expecting to be a lot later than we did get on August 7th. Today, we received the final numbers that we needed in order to calculate the tax rates. All the information has been sent to the ad district, and how that works as normal is we calculate the 2020 rates with all the information, and so does the ad. And then once we have the same numbers, then we're confident that that's accurate. So by the end of this week, we should have the numbers we need from the staff as normal. So in regards to having first and second reading, and I guess a discussion prior to that, you know, our recommendation would be to have the discussion and first reading at the council meeting, and then a week later have a special meeting on September 8th. The only deadline that we really have is September 15th, so we can get all the data to the printers in order to have everything mailed out by October 1st. So I just kind of wanted to give everybody kind of an update of where the staff stands with the tax rate.
So Matt, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing correctly. We basically don't have the full information needed at this point. You might be another few days. Is that correct?
We today, as of today, we have
processed it.
Correct. As of today, we do have the data. You know, it's a difficult calculation to do, which is why we do it and the ad district does it. And then once our numbers are the same, then we know we're good to send it out. And like I said, we talked to the ad district today, and they definitely wouldn't have it today. But hopefully we're hoping by the end of this week we'll have accurate numbers.
So does that mean, and so the suggestion right now is that we just hold off on having that discussion until the September meeting? Is that correct? Or are we suggesting that another special meeting in advance? I didn't catch that part.
Yeah, I mean, we can discuss, I guess the council can discuss whatever they'd like. We just don't, the staff doesn't have numbers to discuss like we normally would. So our only recommendation is we're hoping by the end of this week, we do have the numbers. So, you know, we could be able to put that out to council by next week and give them kind of a week to look at it before a discussion during the council meeting and then first reading. But either way, we are going to have a special meeting special meeting because we need the information out for taxes by the 15th of September. 15th of September in order to make our October 1st deadline. Corinne, did you have a question?
Yeah. When is our September meeting? Do you have the date on you? I don't have a calendar.
It's
in here.
September 1st,
September 1st.
right?
So our committee would be what, the 14th?
The committee would be the 15th.
So
Again,
that's
we
pushing it.
need that.
Yeah.
Well, we have to have it all complete to them by the 15th. And I mean, that's not when we usually like to have it there. That is the drop
Yeah,
dead
yeah.
last time, you know.
So you have to have a first and a second reading before that.
Correct. And again,
So-
I'd like to have it no later than the 8th of September if possible, because that gives staff 4 or 5 days to make sure it's accurate, to put it to the printer, because that's not something we want to mess
So
up.
what if we do, I guess, so we have to have a ordinance, right? Ready for
Correct.
the reading. So should we do 2 different ordinances depending on which way we go? And then just have discussion on the first and then do the first reading? Or
Karina,
how do you
yeah,
do that?
I was thinking that we could do like we had done with the council vacancy, where we just had, that municipal order, the ordinance with just the blanks drawn in, and we can have the discussion and just write those 2 values in, because I think it's just
Can we do
the
that?
2 spots. Yeah.
Okay. So can we do that and then maybe move our committee meeting up a week? I don't know if that's soon enough for Tom to do his presentation, but then that way we only have to have 1 extra meeting in September instead of 2. So that way you can do the second reading on that on the 8th, and then Tom could do his presentation, and then we don't have to have a meeting on the 15th. And then I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to council if you're
Is there-
directing it my way.
If we don't have the second reading until the 15th, does that limit anything? I mean, does that really put a hard stop if they get that stuff on the 16th to the printers?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
good.
I
Well-
just wanted to make sure that 24 hours is going to.
Well, so once you give me the numbers, then we have to put it all together. So it's not like the printer's just waiting for us to give them one number. I mean, that has to be applied across the board. So the staff just needs some time to work that. Green?
So, Tom, would you be able to have your presentation ready by the 8th if we did do that on the 8th?
Yeah, we just need to have the task force meeting before that, just to review what we got from the consultants. So once we do that, it'll just be the presentation coming back with recommendations back to council.
So, all right, well, whatever you guys think. I just threw it out there and.
If there's no further discussion, we'll move on to topic number 2, legacy revitalization grant revisions.
So on Thursday, I sent the revised version of the grant language from last year's iteration. And the only changes, we were eliminating the requirement that the business has to be in Erlanger for 10 years or more. We're opening it up to new businesses and existing businesses that have those same qualifications. So the legacy is still in the title, but possibly rebranding it to like a build your legacy in Erlanger concept, so that it is in involving all businesses in Erlanger, not just 10 or more. And I sent that on Thursday. So does anyone have questions about those changes?
No, I think it's a great idea. I think it doubles down on some of the changes we made with demo revitalization as well. So.
So, and yes. Vicky?
I have a question. I think I understand it. I watched your whatever meeting you called that.
Small business task force
yes,
meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, I watched that on Zoom or whatever. And I understand there were 5 businesses that were already approved. And I was going to ask David tonight if any more were approved. I think there were 7 applications sent
Yeah,
in.
7 applications.
Okay.
Is Dave on?
Now that's just on remodeling. Is that just the exterior or is that interior? That was the part I wanted to ask about.
Dave could probably speak to the content of the applications themselves, but our grant match is for exterior improvements.
Okay.
So that
All
our
right.
money is used to reimburse on the exterior projects.
Okay. And then I was
Is-
wondering too, now this is not with this topic, so I hope I don't get in trouble for bringing this up, but I noticed somewhere where the governor, I think it was in his presentation today, that he approved $9 million, I thought it was, to Northern Kentucky cities and entities, and we were not included. And I was wondering how they got, it's from the CARES Act, but I don't know how they got money and we didn't. And I'm like, what? Anybody
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I don't believe we can, since this is a special
We
meeting.
can't discuss that?
Yeah, we
Okay, I'm
can.
sorry.
Vicky, you can call me tomorrow though, and I'll explain that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, any other questions about the enhancements to the grant?
Good idea.
I have a question.
Whoever was first.
Go ahead, Corinne.
Okay, so if somebody applies for it 1 year, can they apply again the next year? Like if they want to do more things, can they do it multiple years in a row? Or is there because I know they couldn't, something I read, they couldn't do it for 5 years.
In the language, I believe it's actually in the application.
Okay, all right.
Is Dave
And,
on?
They can
Yeah,
read
that's
it.
fine.
Okay.
They can-
Yes.
Dave is not on. I don't believe that is in the ordinance actually to limit it to 1. I'll double check real quick here.
They're allowed to reapply.
All right.
But I thought we had like a 24-month. I feel like it's, I don't know. I think it's in the application. Does it need to be in the language, Jack?
You hear me? Sorry, I'm not at my computer. I can look at that. I mean, what is council's intent? Do we want to limit it? Where someone, I'm trying to pull it up here on my phone. Where
I don't have an issue with it, but
could do it every year, or do we want to have a time barred situation?
There's nothing in the application or the ordinance that can apply.
yeah, I don't think that's an issue then.
I think it would be better to put a little bit of a limit on it so we can try to spread it to as many businesses as possible.
Well, what did you have in mind?
Once every 2 years. I mean, it is per property too.
It is
So
per property.
someone could apply multiple times in a year or every year if they have multiple properties.
True.
I guess just to challenge you a little bit on that, Tyson, what would be the problem with that? If they're putting investment into their properties and they're making those renovations, I mean, it's what we're hoping to accomplish, so why limit it?
It's a good point. I mean, right now, we're not hitting the limit. So
Yeah.
until we begin hitting the limit, that makes sense.
I think if
Yeah.
we get, repeat applications year over year, it's something we could revisit to building that in, but
Are
Patty?
we limiting? Oh, sorry.
Yes, my opinion is if you've got somebody that's interested in taking advantage of it, the only people that are going to benefit is the city
Mhm.
and them and their business. So I'm against limiting it at all.
Jack could correct me if I'm wrong, but we could probably use that if they received it last year and we do get 10 grants and we can only approve 7, would we be able to, as a staff, to use that as a
Absolutely.
reason? not
Yeah,
to?
ultimately, Dave or his replacement is going to make that ultimate decision anyway. And I'm looking through, and again, I apologize. I've said this 3 times, but I really feel naked without my computer because I can't pull stuff up quickly. Just going through, I don't think we have any current restriction on the application or the current ordinance. I think right now, as it is written, someone could make an application each year. Now, obviously, it would have to be a new improvement. They couldn't, and I don't know from a practical perspective how many new applications you would get, but we don't have any current limitation on it.
Okay.
So this is a matching grant, so they do have some skin in the game, which I think is nice. So that would help us make those decisions unless we get overwhelmed with this. That hey, at least they're putting something in this also.
Just to clarify too, we still just have $50,000 budgeted for this, correct?
As of right now, yes.
And it's a $5,000 max per grant. So
Yes.
we can help 10 or more if there are smaller grants that are approved. Thank you.
Anyone else?
One last question. First, I want to say this is excellent. I'm so happy and excited about this, and just wanted to know: will all the businesses that under the 750,000 will they be receiving letters notifying them that this is available, or how will they know?
I know when we did the event earlier in the year in February, Dave Hahn reached out to a lot of our Erlanger businesses to participate in the event where regarding the small business tax credit that's available through the state of Kentucky. So I think that I don't know if he has if he sent a letter or a bunch of emails to communicate, but that would be a channel that we could pursue to communicate out to those businesses that are younger than the 10 years that the program is available. What do you think, Jess?
So what Mike Stubblefield and I did a few times is we had a list of all of the businesses that qualified for the Legacy Incentive Grant, and we have a pamphlet that goes over the information on how to apply and what the restrictions are. And we went door to door. We went to those businesses. We walked into AMCO. We walked into Johnny's, into Colonial Cottage, and we had conversations. You just ask for the manager, ask for the owner if they're there, and we talked to those individuals and explained how this could benefit their business. I see a very similar idea with this. What are the other businesses that could apply for something like this, and just going directly to them and talking to them just helps establish and continue that relationship that we have with our small businesses. I know that I've already talked to Garzelli's, which is a new business. They've been investing quite a bit in their new facility, and one of their biggest questions for us was, can we apply for the Legacy Grant? So making this, that's kind of what brought this change to my mind was, hey, they're doing quite a bit of investing in an already existing building, and it's benefiting the citizens, it's benefiting our economic development of the community. So why limit it? So I think it's going to be a lot of going door to door, individually, and with the $750,000 or less, these are the businesses that we do have more of established relationships with on a personal level, because we're seeing them quite frequently.
Great. So possibly a fun task for Dave Hahn's replacement when that person is hired.
Yeah, when that person is hired, there's going to be a lot of meet and greet, making sure that, me and Matt are introducing this new economic development director as our liaison, making sure that we're making that connection. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to be getting in front of them, not only to build that relationship, but also to show them how, we're investing in these small businesses and we have this potential opportunity for them. The biggest thing that we're hearing from the companies that are applying for the legacy incentive grant and that have been approved is, for example, Colonial Cottage, and we'll have a video coming out here in a couple of days about Colonial Cottage. They're using their legacy incentive grant money to build out some outdoor seating. So with the COVID restrictions, there's all kinds of challenges that come with the restaurant industry at this moment. And he's building a separate door for the to-go orders, the DoorDash and Uber Eats. So he's building that separate door, which is taking money. He's building the outside seating, which is taking money. He's also putting on a new roof. So there's a lot of reinvestment, even though the economy has slowed down due to COVID, and his business is not back up to full capacity, of course. But he's taken the opportunity, with the help of the city, to reinvest in his business.
That's fantastic.
Johnny's Car Wash is doing the same thing. Bob's Sweeper Shop's doing the same thing. Super Bowl is interested. Amco is interested. I believe Amco has put in an application. So there's a lot of good stuff. Tate's Building Supply, I mean, you guys just saw the renovations that they've done. Luke's, the building with the Wicked Dragon tattoo, they're putting out a full facade on the front of that building. Luke's has been in the city for over 5 years or 10 years. So they qualify for the legacy incentive grant. So it's really, it's doing what it intended to do, which is phenomenal. So
Yeah, this is great. Very exciting.
There you go again.
I got a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up?
Okay. This legacy thing, I mean, would it be appropriate to stick a little flyer in the tax bill to say, hey, we're offering this to the business people and what their qualifications need to be? Would that be a smart move?
Only 2 months away.
yeah, we'll be adding that information into the newsletter.
It's good.
If there's no other conversation, we'll move on to the next topic. The changes to the ethics ordinance.
So am I still live? Okay. As most of you know, this document hasn't been updated since 1994. And we wanted to, we've been working with Matt Kramer and Jack Gatlin on pieces and parts of the ethics code itself. One of the changes is adding board members as a definable item, and holding them accountable to various pieces of the code of ethics throughout the process. So you'll see that if you've reviewed the document that I sent on Friday, the additions are underlined and the strike-throughs are what's been removed. We've also added department heads and directors of the city as defined as an officer. Well, first I should ask, does anyone have any questions about the document that I provided? No, okay.
I do. I do.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thank you for all the hard work you put into this. It looks very overwhelming and definitely outdated, and I love some of the changes that you made. I have a question about closed meetings. Section 10. It's kind of vague where it says, let me just read this little section. Can you guys hear me okay? Let's see. Closed meetings shall refrain from discussion any subject other than what was publicly announced prior to convening the closed session. There shall be no public dissemination of the closed meeting discussion other than when formal action is taken in open meeting. And only the minimal information needed to explain the formal action taken. So on where it says only the minimal information explain the formal action taken, is there any way we can add that you can't list names of people discussed during closed session just to avoid embarrassment? I mean, can that language be added? Do you guys think it's necessary? Is it too vague? Or so it's just a question.
Well,
And I guess it's a Jack question.
That's a Jack question.
well, no, I was just going to comment on that. I mean, but we should we're not required in all cases to go into executive session, but we may choose to do so, right? So it doesn't preclude us from having some of those discussions in a public venue. But typically we would just to hide some of the privacy, I guess I thought, typically around, sale of property or, that kind of stuff where we could put the city at a disadvantage. But we could certainly continue with some of those deliberations outside that, correct?
Are you asking, what are you asking exactly, Gary? It's just specific to, under the statute, the definition of closed meetings. So if the other discussions are occurring in a regular meeting or committee, is that correct, Jack?
I'm not sure I understand the question completely. I mean, I guess to answer Corinne's question from a legal perspective, and I think, Rebecca, you and I have had a lot of discussions about this. There is a fine line between having something in the code of ethics and violating the First Amendment. And we're certainly all aware of the litigious nature right now of our society. And I think we have to be very, very, my role is to provide legal advice. You all ultimately can pass whatever ordinances you want to pass. But I think we have to be very careful of that First Amendment right. And, if we had something as specific, Corrine, as what you're mentioning, my concern would be there are times that we would want to have, I don't know how to word it. So let's take an employment decision as an example. We're going to sometimes go into a closed session to discuss an employee. It might be a current employee of the city. So, I don't know how we would word it that then we can't mention that employee's name in an open session. Or, if let's say we're deciding between three people for, I'll just throw a job out there, police chief, I don't think that the law allows us to stop the argument and discussion once it gets to open session. So I think even though there's a discussion in private, I think that the law would allow there to be still an open debate on whether person X, Y, or Z gets the job.
Okay. From a legal standpoint, that makes sense, and I understand. The other question I had, which is also to you, Jack, there's not really anything in here about actual conduct at meetings. Is that another thing where you can do whatever you want in a meeting because it's your rights to do that?
Well, again, Rebecca and I had a pretty spirited discussion about that. And again, council can pass whatever they want. I think anytime we start looking at conduct, one, it's going to be hard to enforce, and two, I believe the law would allow a council person to sit there and scream and holler and cuss at fellow council members. That might not get them reelected. That might not be the smartest move, but I don't think that we could pass an ordinance that restricts negative speech. Or in fact, there was a case I sent to Rebecca that basically even said that you could show up, in Nazi with swastikas and you can't necessarily, stop that behavior, which that's obviously as extreme as it gets. There was a federal case on that. Now, what some cities have done, trying to get around this issue, cities will pass some type of covenants of
Decorum.
Covenants of decorum or things like that, which to use Rebecca's term, and I love it, even though she didn't get the Candyland reference, is rainbows and gumdrops. Was that your
That's correct.
thought of the covenants of
It's a little
of
fluffy.
kindness?
Yeah, if you've read Matt Kramer did, and I did a little bit of research and looked at some other cities around the state, and they're just, I don't think it fits the culture of our city. I think it's important to be able to speak your mind. And we would have to have complete conformance to it. And I don't think that is what we need. Unless you guys think otherwise. I mean, if you want to put together a covenant of courtesy.
Well, I guess it depends on where we go, because I could go with a powdered wig. I mean, that might help if we're going to get to that level. So,
Thanks for your work, Rebecca. This is
Thank you.
Very good.
yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Vicky.
Yeah, I have a question. And this is a pet peeve of mine, I guess, because as a school teacher, I had problems with this that I had to address. But the use of cell phones during the meetings, it's very distracting to see people texting with their heads down when we're at a meeting making discussions, and it seems like they're not paying attention. I guess they're multitasking. But when you realize that you're in front of the public, you're representing your city, it looks like you're kind of dismissing the importance of the discussion. And I was wondering if there are any cities that have rules about council members or department heads or whatever being on their phones, texting people while they're at a meeting during a discussion.
Yeah,
Just a question.
my only concern about that is I know we don't print off documents anymore.
That's true. Yeah.
So
I
my
know what
city
you're gonna say.
phone is where I have to go to try to scroll and find that as well.
I've been pulling
that's
up
what I'm doing tonight too.
the language. I see what you're saying. I think that'd be more of, sorry, Hawthorne is hitting the door. More of just a preference that we could reiterate to the staff. I think writing that into the code of ethics is probably not the most appropriate place for that.
Okay. Yeah, I understand what Gary's saying too, because right now that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at the code of ethics on my phone while I'm on the iPad, because I can't do it on the iPad when I'm on here. So I understand what he's saying. That's a real thing. I mean, you don't have a printed copy in front of you. So if you have your laptop or phone or whatever, you could use that for your printed. So that makes sense.
Were there any other questions? So there were quite a few updates made to this document. We updated the gift amount and honoraria amount to be appropriate with inflation. We added a piece about using confidential information, formally or informally, being obtained as part of the duty of the work with the city, for the benefit of her own benefit or to the benefit or the disadvantage of others or the entity, or to make such information available in a manner where it would reasonably be foreseeable that a person or entity would benefit from it or be harmed by it. We added that in to be applicable to board members, officials, employees, and contractors. So meeting attendance is also on here. if you guys saw that under section 10. So we made this, it's added in here where all city officials and members of city boards and commissions are expected to attend meetings. It's a violation of this code to miss more than 1/3 of the meetings in a 12-month period. We haven't had any issues that I'm aware of, Sherry, with quorum with our group, but I'm aware that that's been an issue with some boards. So that was added in there.
Rebecca, just a quick question on that. Is that, and that was probably the only thing that I had a concern with, I think, and I'm thinking back to last year, Patty, I think when you were out for, several months, after your injury, is that just our regular council meetings? Because I know in our new compensation model, we're accounting for some of that. I would hate to have something in there that if someone had some sort of medical situation that they're now in violation of the ethics ordinance by no fault of their own. That would be the only concern that I had there.
Yeah, we could look to enhance that to just be council meetings where voting occurs. Does that work for everyone?
Just a question here. Would it not, if we're going to deal with the attendance issue, would it not make sense to maybe say missing more than 1/3 without justification or just cause or something of that nature, perhaps? I agree, if there's an illness or something, I wouldn't want to penalize someone for that. But if they just choose not to show up, that's a whole different issue.
Well, then my question is, then how do we determine what a justifiable reason is?
Wouldn't that be in the discretion of the council making the decision whether or not this is a violation? To me, it would seem like if somebody came to me and said, look, I've had a surgery and I can't be at so many meetings, or an illness or something, most of us look at that and say, that's really not going to be a problem for us. On the other hand,
sure.
That's a good point. And ultimately is all of the enforcement up to the enforcement against council, up to council anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I would think so.
We had, Randy did send an excellent enhancement to this document that I need to forward to you guys regarding section 22C that needs to be changed from the executive authority. Randy, do you want to opine on this area, on your recommendation?
Well, there was just a couple questions I had about section 22C. I don't have my email in front of me, but basically what I was saying was, well, first off, it uses the phrase executive authority without defining that phrase anywhere. Throughout the other places, it's the mayor or something of that nature. I think we should use the terms consistently so that there's no ambiguity about what's meant by that. And also, I think there could be a potential problem, and I'll defer to Jack on this issue perhaps, if we're giving the executive authority or whoever authority to discipline council members, because we're especially relative to the issue if we're going to go to a removal situation. As I recall by KRS, that can only be done by the council itself, and that has to be unanimous, as I recall.
Absolutely, Randy. I mean, I agree that C needs to be cleaned up. I think that the executive authority has authority of discipline over employees, and council has disciplinary authority over council.
Right. Yeah, that was my concern, was over council, because I think that's a unique situation with KRS.
Yeah, and I think we have to be very careful that, under KRS 83A, there's very specific statutory discipline process, I guess I should say, for council. So yeah, I think we can clean C up without any issue. And frankly, I think when C was originally added, and Matt, I don't know, I think C was your addition, I think. I don't know who added what, it doesn't matter. But I think we had employee in there, and then we realized, hey, we can't really, council can't penalize employees. We have, frankly, we already have an employee ordinance that kind of provides the discipline for employees. So we will absolutely clean C up. Agreed.
I did have one other question about this closed session issue, if I could go back to that for a moment. Is it your belief, Jack, that they can only we cannot prohibit disclosure of what's said in closed session or just specific things from closed session. Could you clarify that for me?
You know, Randy, that's a great question. And obviously, the only thing that I have been able to find that addresses closed sessions and what can be spoken of at closed sessions is addressed in Robert's Rules of Order.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, there is some ambiguity even in Robert's Rules of Order as to what can be discussed and whatnot. There's nothing in KRS. If you look in KRS under the Open Meetings Act and the exceptions to the Open Meetings Act, there's absolutely no discussion. There's really no Attorney General's opinions on the issue, and KLC really doesn't have a strong opinion about it. You know, I think from a practical matter, I think historically people keep what's done in closed session relatively quiet, but I'm not really sure that other than some of the vague references in Robert's Rules of Order, which frankly are not adopted by statute. We have adopted them by municipal order, but right. If anyone actually reads the 500 pages of Robert's Rules of Order, we probably commit 5 to 10 violations at each meeting. I'm just, you know, and there's nothing in Robert's Rules of Order that say that one violation is greater than the other, right? A violation is a violation. Right. So to answer your question, I don't actually believe that there is anything beyond what I would say what normally is done that would preclude somebody from discussing what's in closed session out in open session. I know that we certainly cannot make ultimate decisions in executive session.
Right.
Those have to be made in a public session, and that, you know, ultimately, I think if you look at a lot of the Attorney General opinions on Open Meetings Act, transparency is important. So really, if you look at Attorney General opinion, they pretty much frown on closed session, period. Right? I mean, it's a very, 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 very narrow set of rules for closed session, and I think that's probably why there's not a lot of what I would say case law or guidance on what can be done out of closed session.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. I mean, I guess, yeah, historically, we've always treated what was said in closed session as being confidential. And frankly, if we go disclosing it, it kind of defeats the point of going into a closed session. So that's why I was wondering if there could be, if there's any legal impediment to saying that remains confidential, or, and when I looked, I didn't see any KRS or anything that says you can or can't do it.
No, I don't think there's much out there, Randy. I really don't. And I think that if you look at the two main reasons that you go into closed session that are generally justifiable by Attorney General opinion, it's employee issues and it's the sale of real estate.
Or litigation.
Or litigation. That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Or litigation. Fortunately, here in Erlanger, we haven't had to deal with a whole lot of litigation in the last few years, right? There is a city I represent that we go into closed session every single meeting to discuss litigation. They love litigation. But you know, I think if you just look at the practical side of that, the reason you're going in to talk about litigation is strategy, right? And a lot of that's attorney-client privileged anyway. So there's probably covered by other laws and other issues. The sale of real estate, generally that becomes moot once you come out and actually come out in an open session and say, hey, I'm buying property X or property Y for $50,000. And the employee issue, there's other KRS and laws that deal with confidentiality of employment matters. So a lot of times we are still restrained to that confidentiality when we come out in an open meeting because of other protections that are out there, whether it be the Policeman Bill of Rights or KRS, 90 or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I don't think, as much as I know counsel probably doesn't agree with the law, I don't really think there are any legal protections to confidentiality.
Rebecca, I had a question. Is your intent now to just work on some of the additional cleanup and then have that ready for the first reading in September?
That's the plan.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Rebecca?
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for all your hard work.
Oh, you're welcome.
but Jack, I'm telling you, I know, law or no law, what is said in executive session should stay behind those closed doors, and you do not come out of those closed doors and name names that may or may not have been in there and embarrass the public. We don't act like that here in Erlanger. That's all I have to say.
Well, since everybody's quiet, I'll move to adjourn.
I have one more question.
Okay.
I have some questions
Okay.
and some comments on this. First, I've got some questions for Mrs. Reckers and Mr. Gallen so I can better understand some of the issues changed on here. Then I've got some corrections and recommendations I'd like to make just so the document flows more consistently. If we're going to go ahead and change it, we might as well make a lot of these things right. As I was reading through it, I found a lot of little things. And then finally, I have a few items I'd like to add to the Code of Ethics while we're modifying it before we spend any money to codify it. So some of the questions have already been answered, but I want to make sure I understand, and maybe it's not an easy answer, but Mrs. Reckers, why are we adding board members to this?
That was at the recommendation of Mr. Kramer.
Okay. All right. And then Mr. Gatlin, I notice in the title of it, it's not underlined there as a change. Is it just below where it says underlined sections are added and struck through that we do that we track those changes?
Right.
Okay.
Because everything above that is insignificant.
Okay. And then okay, going to section 6B. Any violation of this, of this section shall constitute a Class A misdemeanor. And it
We've
goes
struck
on from there. Why are we taking that out?
Well, I think it was our belief that criminal prosecution of this is probably a little strong. And also, as a former county attorney, I don't think anyone's going to take a code of ethics violation as a criminal case.
That was that just in reference to the conflicts of interest in contracts? That was just that section, right? Section 6.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand how those pieces tie together.
Yeah. Okay, then thank you, Mr. Gatlin. Going to section 7, I understand the rationale of bumping it up from $100 to $150. The equivalent purchasing power from the time that this was last changed is more than that. But really the bigger issue, I think, is, instead of looking at it as inflation, I think we should look at it as the intent of putting that limit in there. The limit's not there so that people can enjoy, up to $100 of, gifts or favors. The whole purpose of that is to keep it, well, I would recommend keeping it at $100 since the purpose is to discourage gifts, favors, bribes, things like that. I don't think there's any point in raising that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't see a difference either way. I know some of the past companies I worked for, that was at $75. So.
Yeah, I think $100 is a nice round number. It's something that's going to stick in people's head. If we change it, people are going to wonder, is it 150 or is it 100? I mean, the whole purpose is just so that people don't receive gifts and favors, period.
Well, that was also a recommendation by Mr. Kramer, but it was more if Duke Energy, for example, gifts the city 2 tickets to the Bengals game that
Don't accept it.
that are valued at $110.
Don't accept it.
I don't know. Mr. Kramer, do you care to comment?
Oh, no. Yeah, I just, when we were looking at others that have updated, I mean, if it's something that we're updating, I just put that in there because, we have had that instance where we weren't able to accept just because of the values of tickets at, Res games or Bengals games. I mean, it's nothing that's not a big deal and generally isn't an issue. It was just something to bring up if we're looking at it, just to look at it, because I've seen a lot of other agencies that are updating that.
How many agencies did you research that had increased it beyond $100?
I can think of 2. I'd have to look. I mean, that wasn't a big deal. It was just when I'm going through there, just looking at different things that we've updated. Like Mr. Hermey says, the inflation rates is higher than that, but that seemed like the people that did update it, they were doing $150. But he's right. I mean, the intent of that whole thing is that the gifts are there to influence.
Does anyone else have a comment on that section?
I wanted to make a little comment. I don't know if you feel it's appropriate or not, but would there be a difference between tangible rewards and intangible? You can enjoy the ball game, but after the ball game's over, it's gone. You can take the $100 and spend it on what you want. It's just a thought.
No, I mean, I think the law is pretty clear on that it's the value of the ticket or the value of the dinner. It's all the same, whether it's cash or a cash equivalent.
Okay, well, I would recommend we could just keep it at 100 personally, but certainly open to whatever the majority thinks.
I'm just going to jump in here because ultimately we've got to put this together for first reading. Does anyone have a problem if we reduce it back to $100? I need clarification as to what council wants, 150 or 100?
100 is fine.
Okay, so everyone's fine with 100?
I'm good with
All right.
100.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, Tyson, I just wanted to have clarification there.
Thank you, Mr. Gallen. In section 10B, in the title of this ordinance, we talk about officers, board members, and employees, but then in 10B, we start to bring in other people like officials, former officials, contractors, and consultants. I think we should change official to officer, leave board member there. Former official, I think we need to strike. We might be talking about a separate ordinance or something to that at that point. Then also a contractor or consultant. I thought this was an excellent point to bring in. And I wondered if, Mrs. Reckers, could it make sense to pull that in earlier in the ordinance in definitions and just say that an officer of the city is also a contractor or a consultant for the city? Item G, maybe.
I'm going to jump in there. I think that you bring up a good point, but I don't think we should put it under K, because I think generally officer under KRS has a specific definition, and I wouldn't want to confuse it. I think we could, we can clean this up. Is your concern that we don't identify contractor and consultant earlier, or that all of these rules should apply to contractors and consultants?
I haven't necessarily clarified that in my own head. I just know that, either we should strike it out and say it's not included as part of this, or we should incorporate it, in definitions.
What is your issue with having it there?
If I was if I was scanning over the titles of ordinances, you know, it wouldn't necessarily jump out that there might be a portion of this ordinance that a contract, I mean, if a contractor or consultant is looking for what the rules are, they may not find it here.
Okay, so couldn't we just add it in the title? I think your point's well taken, that contractors and consultants is just added to the title.
Sure. My only issue with that is that, and that's what I'm going to kind of get into here next, is that we have to say it every time. Every time we talk about officers, board members, and employees, we need to mention contractors and consultants too. And as I'm going to start to point out here, I mean, there's a lot of issues, a lot of points in here where we're not talking about all of them. We're bringing up an officer and an employee, but we're leaving out board member, or we're talking about board members and officers and leaving out employees.
That's deliberate. That's deliberate. Because they don't.
Okay.
All of the items don't apply to board members.
I know there's some that don't. There's some that definitely don't.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's keep that, let's hold that thought, and we'll see if we want to put it into the title.
So we could define contractor toward the top, but because they are not defined as an employee under section F at the beginning of during the definitions. But contractor is only mentioned, or consultant is only mentioned the one time in that one section. The misuse of confidential information, where it's probably the most relevant for a contractor.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
a consultant rather.
Me personally, as a contractor who writes contracts, I would prefer that you just put that into the contract that they sign, rather than trying to make them uphold an entire ordinance.
And I guess this is a question for the attorneys on the line here. What would happen if there's a conflict between the contract and the city ordinance?
My microphone on. Ordinance would, well, I would argue the ordinance would prevail.
You know, the same thing exists in the following section, 10C, where we bring up members of city boards and commissions. I mean, I think we just need to keep it consistent and say they are officers, board members, and employees. It would apply to an employee too.
Meeting attendance would apply to employees? No, I'm sorry, 10C you said is.
That is meeting attendance.
Does that belong, and then now that we're jumping on that, does that belong in section 10, or does that really belong somewhere else?
Yeah, I don't think it's a 10C. I don't think it belongs in 10.
So you're saying just keep it off officers and board members?
Well, I guess that's probably one, officers and board members, because I think we're, defining board members in the definitions, but it's not necessarily misuse of confidential information. Perhaps that's another, a section, a new number.
It might be a new number.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's its own separate section.
Okay.
Okay. Section 13C. Here, that's kind of a similar idea as what I was mentioning about the gifts. Moving the amount from $1,000 to $5,000. I don't think it will change the non-elected officers and employees of the city that would need to file the financial disclosure. I mean, I think, again, here is the purpose is that to make sure that the people who control the tax dollars aren't using it for their benefit.
Yeah, but I think we've delegated some authority down to be able to sign some checks, right? So if you get a check for $1,100 or a bill for $1,100, are we requiring that to be an elected official?
It's a great question. Are we doing it right now?
That's a Matt Kramer question.
So that the reason that was increased, Tyson, is because it's a department head level issue, and everything 5,000 or above, we ran through a department head and myself. It just that was changed to follow along the officer of all department heads having to file the financial disclosure. So I'm good either way. I was just trying to line that up with the procurement policy.
That makes a lot of sense. And in that case, I would agree to leave it as it is. I think that's a good idea if it's tied to that. Okay, thank you. Okay, so kind of going back to looking at some other recommendations and just kind of some corrections throughout this. I think we've talked about it in the past, and it's an idea that I really like. And I don't know if other people would be open to this or not, but I'd like to start it on this ordinance. I think we should identify on our ordinances who sponsored it. So, I mean, in this case, it would say sponsored, underneath the ordinance number, it would say sponsored by Councilwoman Rebecca Reckers, August 2020 or whatever. I'd love to get into the habit of identifying who sponsored the different ordinances. Is there any thoughts on that?
I guess my question would be, what's usual and customary out there? Is this?
Yeah, what's the, it's a Jack question.
Okay, you're unmuted.
I'm not really aware of any cities that do that, but I don't think it's an awful idea. I mean, obviously the state legislature does that.
I mean, I think it's helpful too, if we look at it 10 years in the future and realize that the last time it was updated was August 2020, or if we can go back and realize it was, we're updating ordinances during a pandemic and things like that. Sometimes it helps clarify why changes were made and things like that in the future.
Well, the date is a part of every ordinance.
Okay. Well, in putting someone's name on it too would allow someone who's looking at it to ask questions. Direct them to a certain person. Okay, if there's no other thoughts on that, I'll move on. In on the first page, now therefore be it ordained by the city of Erlanger, Kentucky. Everywhere else we refer to the city of Erlanger with a capital C on it, not a small c. And when we refer to the city in general, we put a small c.
I agree. It's a typo. I need to fix it.
Section 2A. We would say, it says public office and employment. Since we're adding in the board members, we would say public office, comma, appointment and employment with the city are public trusts. Section 3.
Hold on. What's your recommendation there?
To add in appointment, public office, comma, appointment, comma, and employment.
Okay.
Section 3, purpose and authority, number A. We refer to board members in the first sentence. And then later in the sentence, we say, and to provide the officers and employees of the city with advice and information concerning potential conflicts. So, Mrs. Reckers, are you saying we would not provide board members with that? Or are you saying that, or was that just left out? I would recommend we add.
Yeah,
board
I think
member.
I think it was left out in error. Yeah,
Okay,
that's a good catch.
Officers, comma, board members and employees. Okay, thank you. Moving down to 3K. No, 4K, excuse me. Yeah, that was another idea I had, was like maybe we could add board member. Can we add board member as an officer? Or you're saying that gets us into KLH trouble, Mr. Gatlin?
I mean, we can add it, anything we want to our ordinance. We define board member above as J.
Do that letter F, do we just combine that definition with the employee that's already been defined? Since we're saying that officer has specific statutory language in KRS.
Oh yeah, look at that. It says contractor of the city under employee.
Not contractor of the city.
Yeah, excluded.
Oh, okay.
Explicitly excluded.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, what was your question, Mr. Meyer?
It was a question whether we should remove the letter F from K and put it elsewhere, either in the definition of employee, because I don't think we're considering them officer.
I think the reason we added that is, again, due to the financial disclosure, because every employee needs to do a financial disclosure, only the department heads that are able to purchase $5,000 or more.
I thought we were making another change around officer below. That's the only reason I was, just for consistency purposes.
Consultant was the only mention of. Where else were we changing officer?
Yeah, I must have marked my note, so I'm okay.
Okay. All right, then going on to section 5A. No officer, board member, or employee, or any immediate family member of any officer. I think we need to add comma, board member, comma, or employee. And then at the end of that sentence, in substantial conflict with the proper discharge of the officers, comma, board members, comma, or employees' public duties. All right. 5D, similar issue, adding board member a second time. Actually, let me back up here.
It's in 5C as well, so
Yeah.
agree. That needs to be consistent.
Yep.
5C as well, yeah. Twice,
Okay.
It's twice in 5C.
Yep. Excellent.
And then under 5C F, should we add a board member? Talking about financial benefit for any of the following? Or add it to A, officer or employee. Should we put board member as well?
You should be added to A.
Okay. Then, 5D, we added board member, but then we need to add it later in that sentence.
Yep.
Officer, board member, or employee, and then later on it says by reason of the officers, comma, board members, what needs to be added, or
Yep.
employee participation.
Excellent.
All right, 6AA. Well, let's see, yeah. 6A, we talk about no officer, board member, or employee. And then in small a, it's basically saying this doesn't apply if contracts were entered into prior to an officer taking office or an employee being hired. I think that after, let's see, the prohibition in section A of this section shall not apply to contracts entered into before the elected officer filed as a candidate for city office, comma, before an appointed officer was appointed to the city or city agency office, comma, and here's where I think we should add, before the board member was appointed, comma, or before an employee was hired. And then we have the same thing in the next sentence.
Mhm.
However, and then it goes into the appointment of an officer. I think we should add again. Let's see. Became a candidate, was appointed to officer, comma, appointed as or hired as an employee. And then section A, B has the same thing. It's basically 3 times in that paragraph where board members should be added in. You see that, Mr. Gatlin? Okay, or Mrs. Reckers.
Yep.
And then 6A, little c, I, the specific nature of the contract transaction and by the nature of the officers, comma, board members, comma, or employee. It's adding in board members again.
Okay.
All right. Section 7. Here again, it's the no officer of the city shall directly or indirectly. Here I would add in board member or employee, add in board member and the employee, that they should not receive gifts. Section 8, the use of city property, equipment, and personnel. Here again, I think we should add in board member. We should refer to the board member or an employee. This is just talking about an officer of the city. But
Yeah, I don't.
we-
What access to property does a board member really have, though?
Well, if it
Like-
was equipment, I mean, if someone said, I'm going to take the mower home and I'm going to mow my yard with this mower because it's much nicer.
A
than
board
mine.
member would do that?
I mean,
I mean, we
personnel.
didn't.
What about personnel? What if I said, I'm a board member and I want the IT department to come over to my house and work on my personal computer?
We don't have an IT department anymore.
We do have
That's not a good
personnel.
example.
We have IT personnel.
I mean, there's no harm in adding board member to this. It's just,
What about employee? Do you agree with employee?
Yeah, we can add that.
Okay.
Tyson, I have a question for you. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
I was just curious as to why, if you had these additions, that you waited till this meeting to enter something to this document that could have been done via email to the committee.
Well, honestly, I thought we were going to have more time to discuss this. I mean, for me to look at it, I just got done going through this probably 15 minutes before this meeting started.
Okay. Oh, it sounds like some of the heads up we get. Seriously, though, on a different note, you could have very easily just said point A, point B, point number C, add board member. I just don't understand why you're taking up everyone's time when we have other things to discuss.
I think this is the last item on the agenda. And it is germane.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Section 8B. It says nothing is this section shall prohibit. I think it means nothing in this section. And then here again, we've got four.
Which section is that, Tyson, again?
I'm sorry, this is section 8B.
Capital B.
Capital B. Yes, thank you. Now here, this might be an instance that you're talking about, Mrs. Reckers. Do you really mean to just say officers in this section? Are we specifically keeping board members and employees out of this section? Because I think that employees could have reasonable out-of-pocket expenses incurred and things like that. However, but actually, before you answer that, this is talking about being paid for public appearances, speeches, or articles. I wouldn't disagree if we said just take this whole section out.
I've got a question about this now that we're kind of digging into that. And maybe I just kind of read it too fast the first time I read it. But does this mean that if there's a pending change to zoning or something like that, that I as a resident could not argue in front of KCPC?
Say that again, Mr. Myers.
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand if we have a potential text amendment or zoning change, and it's got to go to KCPC first. Does this prohibit me from attending KCPC meetings and arguing for or against an issue? Section 9A. Sorry, I thought we were on the 9 already. I apologize.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We were just talking about section 8B, and I was thinking to myself, it does pick up later in this ordinance where that would be prohibited, Mr. Meyer. It would be prohibited to speak against the city, according to this ordinance. You could go and speak in favor, but you would not be able to speak against. So can we back up to section 8B?
Right. Yeah, I see where actually in section 9C, it allows me to speak on my own behalf.
Yeah.
Yep. So that stays.
And I would add board member to that one as well. So section 8B, would we be cool with just taking that whole section out? I mean, I would be willing to bet that in 26 years, since this has been changed, that nobody's been paid to speak or paid for an article, paid to appear.
I mean, I guess devil's advocate, do we have a problem with the word?
What, Jack?
Why does it need to be removed?
I don't think it's ever been used.
But
And I
is it
can't
hurting
see-
anything to be in there?
No, if we need to leave it, then we need to add board member or employee 4 times. And I'll move on.
Noted. Okay,
Thank you.
next.
Thank you. Section 9A.
We just went through this.
Yeah, so there, are we saying board member or employee, that would not apply there? I think it would. I would take, if we did add it, I would take out, after the word constituent, I would take out of the officer. But if you want to just say it's for the officer, that's fine too.
Okay, noted.
Okay.
Next.
What are we doing? What do we want to do on 9A?
I would say board member or employee.
Okay.
That no officer, board member, or employee of the city shall represent any person or business other than the city or constituent, and then take out of the office of the officer. But as Mr. Meyer pointed out, then section C does allow them to represent themselves. So going on to that section C, I think we should add in board member. Prohibit any officer, board member or employee from representing himself or herself. Okay, then going down to section 10A. In the last sentence, the word officer has a capital O, and we've referred to officer with a small O every other time.
Okay.
Then B, section 10B. In the first sentence, we refer to the city twice, and the C on city should be a small c.
Actually, I disagree on A. I think we should probably refer to officer with the capital letter O throughout this entire document, since that's how it's defined.
Okay.
I think the changes in A were actually appropriate. I think the whole document needs to be changed to refer to officer with the capital letter O.
So would board member and
We have to be consistent.
employee
with how-
also be?
I mean, I think we have to be consistent with how it is in the definitions.
Yep.
Well, the definitions, it's because it's the first word of the sentence.
Not in italics.
Well, okay. Whatever it is, I mean, just so it's consistent.
I agree.
When it's in quotes, it's defined.
Okay. So officer, board member, and employee needs to be capitalized throughout.
An easy fix.
Yep.
What else?
Okay. Yeah, I had a similar comment on that section 10C. as you guys have already mentioned. Here again, the elected city officers. So Jack, you're saying city should be a capital C there? I think it'll be small c. But yeah, my question, I wrote here, I noted, what if someone has maternity leave, paternity leave, military service, prolonged sickness, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I think
we've already talked about that. We're going to
Yeah.
add some kind of provision in there.
Yep.
Moving on to section 11. I think we should add board member in there as well, post-employment restrictions, no officer, comma, board member or employee. But then as we go on in that sentence, it says, shall appear or practice before the city. Instead of a space, we have a period between the and city.
I don't agree with that.
In what? In adding board member and employee? Or I'm sorry, board member?
Yeah. 'Cause
Okay.
I think there's no harm in it not being there.
Okay. I don't disagree because you're talking about post-employment. And a lot of times our board members are not paid.
Correct.
Or on the payroll. Well, actually, I guess they are paid, but it's not on the payroll, correct? Okay. Good point. Section 12. What about there? What do you think there, Mrs. Reckers? Add board member and employee that they should not accept gifts greater than $100.
This is not. Does this exclude, and I'm asking this to Matt, Mr. Kramer, like when we do a service gift for folks who have been here for an extended period of time, is it not to exceed 100? Or is that a different?
I don't know if we spend more than 100 or not. But that would apply, I mean, it would just need to be approved by council like we've done in the past. If it is something that's over
Okay.
that, they would
Okay.
need to approach council for
we
approval.
can-
Because I mean, all of this can be, you can receive a $1,000 gift as long as council and the mayor approve.
Okay.
But that's really a separate issue. I mean, the city is arguably giving that gift to the employee. So if anything, it's a compensation issue for the city. I don't think it's really an honoraria situation.
Okay.
Right? I think the intent of this is bribing or someone outside the city trying to get in through giving donations.
So you agree that we should add board member or employee as well?
Absolutely. In all these sections, I absolutely agree that that's been.
Okay, so that'll be modified.
Okay.
Next.
Section 19A.
Getting closer to the bottom, guys.
Yep. Nepotism. Adding a board member in there, no officer, board member, or employee. Same with section 19B. No officer, board member, or employee. What do you think about that? That you may not agree with that, Mrs. Reckers.
I don't think a board member would ever be in the position to
No. I don't think that's appropriate.
discipline.
What about employee?
I think we're restricted by the item before that, right?
Okay. Okay, strike that. Thank you. 21A, retaliation. Here I would add in board member as well. No officer, comma, board member or employee. And then later in that same paragraph, it's the Northern Kentucky Regional Ethics Authority, not the association. Change association to authority.
I did not. Okay.
Okay, then section 21B. This section shall not be construed as prohibiting disciplinary or punitive action if an officer, comma, board member or employee, so adding board member again in there.
Okay, noted. Next.
Thank you. Okay. Section 22 on penalties. We're revising the code to include employees, but there are no penalties for breaking any of these codes.
So we actually deliberately excluded employees from that section
Okay,
because they fall under, I don't know where Matt Kramer went, but they fall under, that falls under their employment, not code of
Okay.
ethics.
okay. So a thought popped into my head as far as we were talking about up to 1 month's pay. And especially if we're talking about, if we have a fire chief, I'm 99% sure that Chief Whitaker works only for City of Erlanger, but a lot of firemen do work for other municipalities. 1 month's pay, is that talking about just from Erlanger?
This is not including employees of the city.
Well, but he's not considered an employee in this. He's considered an officer.
I disagree with that.
Well, that's the way it's written.
We would have no
then we should-
control over more than 1 month's pay, though. I mean, it would only be Erlanger pay if that was the case. And we discussed that too, because we wouldn't be utilizing the ethics committee to discipline our employees, especially financially. That would be up to the executive authority to either suspend without pay or terminate.
So does that mean we need to circle back and change a non-elected officer and pull that out of definitions?
I think so. I think we have to take department heads out of the officers and put them into employees then. The department heads and directors.
Or it could be just easier. I mean, there's a lot of other people who qualify under officer that really would not be subject to this discipline. Wouldn't we maybe instead just define, instead of any officer, just say any legislative body member or found by the Board of Ethics, or any legislative body member or board member?
That works.
Yeah, legislative body member, that's
Actually,
in the definitions. Yeah.
to be candid, we probably clean this whole mess up if we just add to the definition under Officer KB, a legislative body member, including a board member.
Yes. I like that a whole lot.
Now
better.
you tell us, Jack.
Way
Then
to
I could have stopped. I would have been done like a half hour
Jack for the
ago.
win. Jack for the
Yeah,
win.
sorry, I'm a little late. I'm a
That's,
little
I
slow
tried
tonight.
that. I tried that early on.
I know.
We're too far in.
Okay.
But
Well,
do we, I mean, I think that probably covers it, right? I mean, I think I understand what your intent is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, let me talk a little bit more about the penalties then. Personally, I think it was written well before with allowing the Board of Ethics to set the fine and just saying that it had a maximum. I mean, before it said maximum of $1,000. I think we're better off letting them set it rather than us saying 1 month's pay for each offense. That might be I think we might find that could be pretty harsh for some of the items in here.
If we're going to leave it at 1 month's pay, does that need to be 1 month's expected pay, given that we have a council compensation change forthcoming?
Right. I think it adds too much complexity, and it's going to be very confusing in the future if this ever has to be enforced.
Well, I'm surprised it was $1,000 to begin with in 1994, because that was a substantial amount of money 26 years ago.
Yeah. Personally, I would like to change that. If we said 1,000, let the regional ethics board set the fine not to exceed $1,000 or whatever we say it's going to be. But I like this idea, and I would like to see if anybody else would like this. But when found guilty, the violator must write a public apology admitting their mistake. If we're just going to be talking about legislative body and board members and officers of the city, that's the whole point of this, right? Is to try to shame someone.
Tyson, would you be willing to do that?
I haven't broken any of these yet.
Okay. Just curious.
Yes, if found guilty, I would.
Tyson, which ones are you planning on breaking?
Yeah.
It is only Tuesday, guys.
Yeah, right. The day's not over. Well, then I would say too this, Mrs. Sudkamp, what if we said same vice versa? If someone accused someone of something and was wrong, that they write the apology vice versa?
See, falsely impugning, we talked about this, and it would fall under the First Amendment.
Am I
right, Mr. Gatlin?
We're not stopping it. I'm just saying that if it's found guilty,
You'd have to write an apology?
Mm-hmm. And if you've accused someone falsely, then you have to write an apology.
I say no. Let's move on.
Okay. I won't get hung up on it.
There's been some false impugning in the past. I want to make sure that this is appropriate to stay on course.
Okay. So just let me clarify one more thing here on section 22 penalties. So starting with any officer or board member, is that item A?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
The strike through. If you carry.
Then moving down to an acknowledgement of this code of ethics, would that be B?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And then C. Okay. Got it. Okay, so I think that's all I had on the corrections.
Great.
Then I have a few items I'd like to add.
Okay.
Going back to, and this may not be the right section, but I'm thinking section 5. 5A, the first thing on here, I would like it to say, all officers, board members, and employees shall uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, as well as the Constitution of the state of Kentucky.
Haven't we inherently done that when we swore our oath of office?
Well,
and I promise not to challenge you to a duel either.
Okay, but if I were to say you're not upholding that, I would have to file a lawsuit against you. This would allow me to make a complaint to the Regional Ethics Authority.
Are you talking about for employees?
I would really disagree.
Mr. Hermes?
Maybe not employees. I'd be open to leaving them off. Not all of them have taken an oath, correct?
Not 100% correct.
Okay.
Almost all of them.
If I could say something, judges can't agree sometimes on what the Constitution means. I would hate to have people fighting ethics charges because of a disagreement over a constitutional interpretation.
Okay, that's fair. What if we said all officers and board members must uphold their oath of office?
The whole point of the oath, though, isn't it?
But what I'm saying is, if I say that you're not upholding the oath of office, where do I go for that, Mr. Blankenship? Who do I complain to?
Well, I think you could complain to the electorate and they could vote you out if that's the case.
Well, then we can get rid of this whole thing because that's all the case.
No, there's some very specific things. The problem with what you're saying there, in my opinion, is it's so vague in general that, the people could in good faith disagree on what it means. Like you talk about the Constitution. I mean, we all want to uphold the Constitution. We all say we're going to uphold the Constitution, but we've all seen 5-4 decisions coming out of the Supreme Court of the United States where, judges don't agree what that means. So I think having specific rules is one thing. Having punishment based on very vague generalities is quite another thing.
Okay. Okay, then if we add in, how about this? Section 5A, all officers, board members, and employees must stringently uphold the Open Meeting Act, KRS 61.800 through 850. Meetings of a body or a quorum shall be advertised, recorded, and documented. Any slightest violation shall be cause for penalty. Any problem there? All right, I'll move on then. All officers, board members.
I'm going to just stop for a minute. So is there any objection to that addition, or are we going to go ahead and add that?
No, I mean, I think that would need discussion because in theory, we should be following that now.
But we don't.
When do we not?
Yeah, when do we not?
If we have a committee meeting with 2 committee members, we're breaking the Open Meeting Act.
We're in a committee meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're not. But if it's televised, what committee meetings are you referencing?
Okay, so if I had a fire committee meeting and Mr. Nicely and I get together to talk about what's going on with fire or the sale of an ambulance or a purchase of an ambulance, technically that should be an open meeting. That should be done in an open meeting. We should advertise that meeting because we are meeting with a quorum of that committee. We violate this regularly.
But committees are created by the governing body, not the KRS.
And
Isn't
also,
that
you're not making decisions, you're having discussion.
Yeah.
There's no decision making, so how is that a problem?
Right.
Well, but I guess we're not able to discuss public business if we have more than a quorum.
Right.
So with the way our committees are structured with just 2 members, those 2 people can't talk about, tax rates or fire without pushing that as a public meeting.
Mrs. Kyle.
I wanted to ask if that's referring to like the police committee, when we go and talk to the chief before the council meetings. Are you talking about that? I mean, because
that would fall under it.
Yeah.
Because we do that on a regular basis. We meet with the chief and ask him what he wants brought before council. I just think that's getting ridiculous.
Well, it may be, but the Kentucky Revised Statute says we can't do that.
So why don't we look at consolidating some of the committees and adding more people to them?
I think that's a great idea, but
that's exactly
but
what I think.
outside of this document.
Right, a conversation for a different day.
Yes, correct.
question. Doesn't the Open Meetings Act already contain penalties for violations?
Again, who do I complain to about that?
Well, I think that goes to the Attorney General, actually.
So what I'm saying is this would allow us to bring it to light and handle it on a more local level.
That is a good point, Randy. I mean, if there's already things in place to handle that, are we just duplicating something that exists already?
Well, that was kind of my thought about it, yeah.
Actually, 61,880.
So, Mr. Blankenship, are you saying that there's no other items in any of these other sections that isn't already covered in the KRS?
Not that I'm aware of, but I mean, you're raising specific issues such as open meetings law, and we already have an open meetings law, which contains its own penalty provision. So I think
It's
we're
all
just
over.
making it.
It's all over throughout here. This whole thing is full of that. There's all kinds of stuff that's referred to in KRS as well.
No, but we're required to have an ethics ordinance.
Right.
Right. And as Mr. Gatlin said, we can say what we want in here. If there's a duplication, I don't see what the problem will be. We'll talk more about that. Let's think more about that. Okay, all officers, board members, and employees must pass a drug/alcohol test and shall be subject to random drug or alcohol tests.
Absolutely not.
That would really raise some constitutional issues. 'Cause
Yeah.
that would be a Fourth Amendment search and seizure, I would think.
Okay. Next recommendation.
All officers, board members, and employees shall dress appropriately in a way to best represent our city.
What's that definition?
Yeah.
Appropriate.
Well, I would say t-shirts, shorts, gym shoes would be prohibited.
It's my constitutional right to wear what I want to wear. So if we can't do conduct, I don't think we should judge what people wear to meetings. I don't see people wearing hoods in their shirts and stuff. So.
Freedom of expression there,
Yeah.
Mr. Hermes.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Well, then would you have a problem with this? What if we said no obscenities during the meeting? Is that a constitutional?
Obscenities would be the First Amendment, right?
If you can mock somebody on a council meeting, you can use obscenities. You can't have it both ways. That's my opinion.
Okay. How about no grandstanding at a meeting?
What would this be defined as for the last hour? Asking for a friend.
Yeah. Sometimes special meetings are like that too, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or filibustering, same thing.
Okay. Do you want to make it so it's a rule that we can't do it? Wouldn't it? It sounds like you're in agreement. Let's go ahead and put it in.
I don't think that's necessary.
I would recommend we put in no grandstanding at any meeting.
I disagree
I disagree.
because you're doing it now. So
All right. If an officer, employee, or board member falls asleep in a public meeting, they shall pass a drug and alcohol test within 12 hours of the meeting and shall have proof of a favorable physical exam within 3 days of the incident. How about that?
Are you getting this stuff?
That's not happening.
Okay. How about officers, board members, and employees shall arrive early to meetings and shall stay until the meetings are over. Arriving late or leaving early shall be counted as an absence.
No.
I don't know why. Especially if we're going to start keeping tabs of.
Well, we have, I think, specific protocols when we're taking meeting minutes on when people arrive late, though that's being recorded, but
So if someone shows up and they get their roll call and then they leave after that, they get their $50 for that meeting.
No.
I think we should say that they need to stay for the whole meeting.
I don't know that that's an ethics.
No.
And sometimes, you know, you have to balance your life.
Okay. Section 19A. I'd like to add an item there. If we're going to say no officer, board member, or employee of the city or city agency shall advocate, recommend, or cause the, and right now it says employment, appointment, promotion, transfer, or advancement of a family member. I'd also like to add in election.
That would be a conflict with the qualifications for elected office right now, I would believe. I'll let one of the attorneys address that, but I don't know that we could put that in there.
No.
So I just want a better definition of what you mean by what you mean by election.
Well, if we have someone advocating, recommending, or causing the election of a family member, I think it's, see, being that we're addressing officers of the city. I get a quick question. Has the Northern Kentucky Regional Ethics Authority reviewed this?
No, this is a rough draft, so no, they haven't.
Okay. So we're having a special meeting to review a rough draft?
And
I
talk
think
about
they should be-
taxes and grants, yes.
As the body that has to enforce this document, I think they should be brought into the loop.
Jack, what's the typical procedure for that?
I would agree with Mr. Hermes. I think they're going to rubber stamp it, but I think they certainly should be aware of what we're doing to make sure that they have the ability to enforce. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I'm going back to 19A because I'm a little confused if we're adding it or not on the election, and I'm trying to read it and understand what we're trying to prevent there. So no elected official, arguably, no officer, board member, or employee shall advocate for the election of a family member. Is that what you're wanting to add there?
Yes.
Excuse me, but I completely disagree with that. We have two families that have family members on council. So you don't think that Renee should be allowed to support Don? And Kathy should not support Tommy? You're bringing up ridiculous things.
Just an idea.
So we'll pass on that one.
Stupid one.
Right. I think that, I mean, if Mr. Gatlin agrees as well, I definitely think that the Northern Kentucky Regional Ethics Authority should be brought into the loop on this. I think I'd like to get their feedback as to what works in other cities and what doesn't work in other cities, and ultimately have their input. I think it would be appropriate for the mayor to set up an ad hoc committee regarding this, because I think it is that important.
So Mr. Gatlin, does that need to be before or after we get this rough draft taken? Because I think you could go either way with that. You talked about the rubber stamp for this. However, when we look at this, we are assuming that we have to come up with some ideas, thoughts that we need to present also.
I mean, I think it just depends on the level of input that we would want them to be a part of this process.
If they're the governing body, then shouldn't they be very involved?
They're the enforcement.
They're the enforcement.
Yeah, I think they should. I'd be happy to chair that committee, Mayor.
I'm sure you would.
Okay, so I have a motion to create an ad hoc committee.
That's not up to the to council. It's not a vote.
Nikki?
I have a question. Why are we setting up a committee for something that's already been written? And I just don't understand all these things that Mr. Hermes wants to add. As far as the grandstanding is concerned, I am always convicted of grandstanding by Mr. Hermes. And that is not the reason I am on council. If I wanted to grandstand, I'd go someplace else. I'm sorry. But all these things you want to add, I don't understand why. What are you trying to achieve here?
Well, I guess I'm going by the first whereas here, you know, to promote and manifest the highest moral and ethical standards among the officers of the city.
But a lot of these things are opinions. I mean, as far as grandstanding, I could comment on that with a lot of people, but I don't
Right.
come out and say that, you know, this person is grandstanding. That I don't think you can actually prove. So my opinion with making legislation has always been, if you can't enforce it, don't make it a law. You're getting too technical here, and it's just, I think it's going to cause more problems than achieve anything. That's just my opinion, but that's what I think. It's like when you have a classroom, when you're a teacher, you got to be careful about what laws you make and what penalties, because you're going to have to enforce that. You might be causing more harm than good. And I think that's what I'm seeing coming up here.
I agree. I agree completely. And as a builder, there's a lot of codes that are on the book that are completely unenforceable as well. And people don't follow them because there's no way of enforcing some of these things. I'm not one of those type of builders, but a lot of people out there do that kind of work. I agree completely. And, you know, so, I mean, Mrs. Kyle, I mean, section 10A is probably not enforceable. Should we take out that change?
So are you suggesting with the ad hoc committee that it be separate from this document?
No, it's totally regarding and revolving around this document.
But
I mean,
included in the document?
I would still recommend that we said this says it's sponsored by Councilwoman Rebecca Reckers, regardless of this ad hoc committee. I'm not trying to take this away from you.
I don't understand the reference to 10A. I'm looking at 10A. It's about closed meetings. What's that got to do with people supporting other people in their family, or grandstanding, or I'm just not following.
You brought up the fact that some of that stuff's not enforceable. You said that
okay.
some of those items are not enforceable. This one I don't believe is enforceable either.
No, I think at closed meetings, if you go out in public and talk about it and you're caught, that's enforceable. And I know whenever we had executive meetings in the past, our city attorney would tell us, now remember, you're in executive session, do not discuss this because, and we haven't been told because, but I figured we were smart enough to know that whatever we discussed in executive session was a closed issue that we don't discuss with anybody. And if you do, you'd be caught. I mean, somebody is going to notice that and they're going to say, hey, you know, she talked about this. This was an executive session. Therefore, you can enforce that. You can punish that person. To me, that's enforceable.
Well, I would think grandstanding would be as well.
But you accused me of grandstanding a long time ago, and I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
When I when
And
I
I've
called you
been
out,
accused as well. I've been accused many times. And all I'm trying to do is go through the document and give it the attention it deserves. And I know
but
this
you
is getting
can't
turned
prove
into
that somebody's
grandstanding.
grandstanding. You can't prove what my intention is. My intention that night was not to grandstand. It was to bring truthful things out. So, but you can't prove whether I was grandstanding or not, is what I'm getting at.
Mhm.
You cannot prove that. You can't prove what somebody's intention is.
Okay. I'm more than happy not putting it in there.
I am too. I really am. Don't like it.
Is there anything else? Because
That's all I
personally,
had. Thank you very much, Mrs. Pitts. That's all I had.
thank you. I think cleaning this up and getting it ready for a first reading and everybody review it before the meeting is a great idea. And if Tyson wants to do his committee and create some other thing, that's fine, but I want to go with this. That's just my thought.
I like it the way it's written with the corrections that were made.
I agree with that.
All right. I'd like to move that we adjourn.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Have a good evening.